Welcome.
So thank you for being here today. Thank you for participating in this, once again, remote Sunday service that we're having. I had a communication from our sound tech, Philip, this week. He reached out to see what was going on with us and if we were still meeting. And I asked him how he was doing and how graduation was and where he was going to school, because that was the big question the last time we talked. Was he had offers from a whole bunch of different places and he couldn't decide. So he was excited that he had gotten into Rice University in Houston. So he said, I didn't think they'd let me in because it's such a hard school to get in, but that's where I'm going. So that was really awesome to hear from him and to hear that his point of view, that even though graduation was different and odd and strange, it was still spectacular. So any story we have about the kids not getting graduation and making memories, I think they're just really different memories. So it will be a very unique time 20 years from now when they go back and tell the story of the 2020 graduations, because it's definitely a different time. So I want to start today's talk by, I looked at my title and I thought, there's a reason. You've got to be kidding me. I picked that for my title. And yet I did. And we're finishing up this series for the month about not making our decisions about our future from our memories, from our rear view mirror, from how it's always been in our past. And this experience that we're all having of this virus, we didn't have a mental equivalent or a model in our history, most of us, for how to live this way, because the last time there was anything like it, none of us were alive yet. And this last couple weeks especially, we've not had an experience of unacceptable racist behaviors that's just been flat in our faces like we have had this last week or two. So how do we look at our present experiences and see them clearly? Not be trapped by our history, not be trapped by how we think it ought to be, not be trapped by stories people tell us, but how do we see our experiences clearly so we can move forward in a useful direction? So that was the task I set out for myself this week, and it was an armful. So I don't know about you, but I haven't been sleeping all that great. And Saturday morning, I was up before the sun, and I decided that I'd get out and have a walk around my neighborhood before it got any warmer. There's a circuit that I do almost every day, though it's usually at sunset, not before sunrise. And I walk in my flip-flops, because that's what I do, and I make a very predictable, loud noise as I walk through the walls of my townhouse complex. And the dog walkers are always teasing me that I'd never be able to sneak up on somebody because of the flapping noise that my shoes make. So as I was walking yesterday morning, I was remembering a post that I saw on Facebook earlier this week of a fairly young Black dad who was walking in his own neighborhood with his very young daughter and his little dog. He wrote that he felt afraid to walk in his own neighborhood without his daughter and his dog, because he was afraid that someone might see him as a threat and then take some action against him that could be harmful. Now, if I hadn't seen the events of this past couple weeks, I would have thought he was overreacting. And maybe he was, and maybe he wasn't. It's not my place to decide. Clearly, he felt unsafe in his own neighborhood. And that's why I was reflecting on it, because Here I am out walking by myself. Sun's not even up yet, and I feel absolutely safe. So for him to not feel safe and to feel like he needed to have protection of having his daughter and having his little dog, that left me feeling very sad for him and for the state of our world, because that's the mindset that so many people are experiencing right now. So that led me to wonder about what's going on societally in our little corner of the world. When this isolation period started, people were generally being very kind and caring and careful and considerate. And now that this period of limited movement is dragging on and on and on and on and on and on, and there's not really a clear end in sight, I'm starting to notice some less generous and some would even say reckless behaviors. And I wonder if you've noticed it too. Neuroscientist Mark Waldman put together an educational video for CSL called Pandemania and the Neuroscience of Anxiety. I shared it with the folks who participated in the daily practices last Thursday, since some of the attendees had been talking about feeling anxious. His long list of the types of anxiety blew my mind. It was worry, disappointment, frustration, feeling annoyed, feeling vulnerable or uncertain, feeling nervous, irritated, unlucky, panicky, having doubt, guilt, fear, jealous, feeling helpless, hopeless, or worthless. What's going on in this pandemic that's creating all these kinds of reactions in so many people? I don't have an answer. I have some thoughts. One thought, a possible answer, comes from the writings of a 20th century Jewish, German philosopher and theologian by the name of Martin Buber. Martin proposed that there are two ways we engage with other beings in relationship. He called them the I-thou relationship and the I-it relationship. He's not using the word it the same way religious scientists do, referring to the divine in a gender-neutral way. He's using it, in quotes, to refer to a relationship with a thing, something that we use to perform a service for us, or someone that we treat as a thing that performs a service for us. For instance, if I never bothered to learn who my mail carrier was, they just deliver the mail, then I have a service relationship with them. I have an it relationship with them. They don't matter to me as a person. They don't matter to me as a human. But if I have taken the time to learn their name, to learn about them as human beings, I start to see them and I start to engage with them and interact with them as a human. And I start shifting my relationship with them from an I-it to an I-thou. And in an I-thou relationship, we value the other individual. They matter to us. And we begin to treat them as though we would if we were engaging with someone who we thought of as divine, because they are, and we just hadn't noticed it before. My story about Philip at the beginning, I mean, he's the kid that ran sound, right? If I think of him as the kid that ran sound, he's an it, but he's not, he's Philip. And so I can celebrate having that divine relationship with him and celebrating his choice and his good fortune at being able to do something that he couldn't even imagine was possible. So we have this option all the time of seeing our world and people in it as things that serve us, or as divine beings we get to interact with. Which is why I asked Shelley if I could do the meditation today, because I wanted to work with that idea of seeing, really seeing different kinds of people that we engage with, and seeing them as divine rather than as, an image on a screen that's just creating a reaction in us. So I think what may be going on in the world right now, and so many people are feeling anxious and uncertain about everything because nothing is normal and nothing is likely to be normal anytime soon. And so they have reverted to a very tribal way of thinking about anyone who is not known, who is not like them, who is not familia. And as a result, it's okay to mistreat them or ignore them or disrespect them or cut them off. From my recent experiences or observations, many people treat other people as annoyances or irritants or as things in their way, rather than as the divine beings that they are. And all this is part of our power of awareness. Each of us has the ability to shift our awareness of the larger world events and our own interpersonal experiences from I-it relationships to I-thou relationships. And when we do this, like Daryl said before we started this morning, everything changes. I told the folks who showed up for daily practice yesterday my story about the cement truck driver. I was up absurdly early, and I realized I needed some books to work on my talk that were at the office. So I got in my car, hit McDonald's on the way in, and got my coffee and my breakfast biscuit. And then I was driving home still before 7 o'clock. And I turned on to La Cholla, which is on my way home, and this cement truck driver pulls out in front of me, going 20 miles an hour. And I'm thinking, okay, dude, I have a choice in this moment. And I watched myself work through my choices. Of course, I started out being irritated at him and calling him names for pulling out in front of me, and then going half the speed limit for a whole mile. And then I remembered that I could think about him as though he were an endearing uncle of mine or a cousin, and he just wasn't thinking, or he was preoccupied, or he felt bad that he didn't notice I was behind him, and he pulled out and he was shifting gears just as fast as he could, but that was all he could do. And I have no idea what was going on in that truck. I do know that it made a difference to me. And it made a difference in my way of perceiving him. And because we're all connected and there's only one, it made a difference in his day too. So we have to decide how we want to be in the world. We can't have a positive impact on the world or national events by getting riled up and angry about them to the point of irrational action. I was really sad on Friday night or Saturday morning to learn that Friday night's gathering downtown Tucson of protesters turned violent and lasted a very long time, and that some people got hurt by thrown rocks and thrown bottles that were thrown by other people. So I was hopeful last night. When I went to bed, I turned on the news to see what was going on with the protesters, and last night started quietly. There were protesters gathered at U of A, but it was quiet. It was gentle. It was still a protest, and appropriately so. And it wasn't aggravated and irritated. So I was really hopeful when I went to bed last night that, yes, we do know how to protest in a way that our point is made and what needs to be said is said and shown, but it doesn't have to be angry, irrational, dangerous, damaging, or, adding to the negativity in the world. So I was really bummed when I woke up this morning and looked to see what happened after I went to bed. And about 11 o'clock, they decided quiet wasn't good enough, so they went downtown and started making mess. We get what we create, and we get to experience that. And we have to be in charge of ourselves and know that we get what we create. And that's so hard because it's so easy to get pulled into something, and it feels really like being pulled by a vacuum, pulled into something that is, we're no longer thinking, we're just reacting. So we can have a positive impact on our world and our national events and our local events if we shift how we think about the events and the people involved in them, how we talk about them to ourselves and with others, and how we act on behalf of some greater good. That doesn't mean we don't act. It does mean we're thoughtful and intentional when we do act. We have to be really clear on why we're engaged and what we intend and our personal motivations. I was disturbed this morning when I was looking at the pictures from last night, because it looked like, and of course it's my bias, right? It looked like people were playing to the camera and looking for images that gave them their 45 seconds of fame. And it wasn't about a protest. It was about, hey, look at me, I'm important. And that doesn't serve. That doesn't serve. If we have to manage our emotions, we have to manage our reactions, and we have to not get hooked. We not to have to get hooked, period. It's very, very difficult, and it is possible. And it's going to challenge us for a while. And I know this. It's going to. And that's what we get to work with, because we're here now. And we've picked here and now to be here and now. So there's an author by the name of Harry Moody who wrote a book called The 5 Stages of the Soul, charting the spiritual passages that shape our lives. He's basically taken Joseph Campbell's hero's journey and told it with different words. But in his 5 stages of the soul, he has a quote. As ordinary people in a difficult world, we are asked to take the commonplace activities that occur to us hour by hour and discover the spiritual lessons in them. So I want to tell you about a video I saw on Facebook this week. It's a close-up of a middle-aged black guy with dreads and gray hair at his temples and in his beard. And it's just his face. I don't know how he manages because I can't sit that close to my computer. But he says, before you call the cops, I just wanted you to know. The first thing I did this morning when I woke up was yell at my alarm clock. My parents were raised in the South. I have to roll tide. I had to look up what that meant. His parents went to the University of Alabama. I have to roll tide or they'd disown me, my parents. They raised me in Las Vegas. That city has my heart. I hate spiders. I'm a vegetarian. I'm not proud about that. I've done goat yoga. I'm definitely not proud about that. I can tell you every single word off the NWA Straight Outta Compton album. NWA is a rap group. I had to look that up too. I can also sing to you every word from the musical Oklahoma. Bananas are disgusting. I'm a Christian. I spend almost every Sunday morning teaching kids in Sunday school. I am often asked if I'm a Muslim. I'm okay with that. I'm pretty much convinced if you met my mother, you'd automatically become a better person. My father's a vet. I can do this. He taught me to say yes, sir, and yes, ma'am, to everyone I meet. I don't hate our president. I pray for him. I love basketball and also hockey. He then shows pictures of his 4 brothers, James, Mike, John, and Rob. 2 have darker skin and 2 have paler skin. He continues, I've never been to jail. I've never owned a gun. I hate that anyone at all might be afraid of me. I'd go all the way around the world and back again if I knew that single act might make your day better. I'm a proud man. I'm a proud Black man. Does any of this really matter? No. I just wanted you to get to know me better before you called the cops. Now that you have an appreciation for this man, what sort of a relationship could you have with him? Would it be I, thou? Or would it be I, it? I know what mine would be. I'd love to sit down and talk with him some more. Several years ago, our Sacred Cinema group showed a film called Accidental Courtesy about a Black blues musician named Daryl Davis, who through a very unexpected set of circumstances was able to talk with and reframe the beliefs of over 200 KKK members, one person at a time. He said, "You're not going to beat the meanness out of a mean dog. You start beating a mean dog and it's going to get meaner. You start beating racists, they're going to get more racist. And you can't hate the hate out of a person. You can't beat the hate out of a person, but you can love it out." Does this sound to you like another reformer you know? Martin Luther King Jr.'s famous quote, and you know he lived this: "Returning hate for hate multiplies hate and adds deeper darkness to a night already devoid of stars. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate multiplies hate. Violence multiplies violence. Toughness multiplies toughness in a descending spiral of destruction. So when Jesus said, 'Love your enemies,' he is setting forth a profound and ultimately inescapable admonition. The chain reaction of evil, hate begetting hate, wars producing more wars, must be broken, or we shall be plunged into the dark abyss of annihilation. King said those words in 1957. Do you have any idea what was going on in 1957? Russians had launched the Sputnik. Both the US and USSR had launched intercontinental ballistic missiles. The potential to blow us all off the planet was very real and a very present danger. We needed a wise man to show us an alternate reality. Not by looking backward, not by looking at what had been that didn't work, but by looking forward to what was possible. By looking forward to all people. We have a very long way to go with that. And yet I do still believe it's possible with focus and intention and right thinking. Centers for Spiritual Living has a mission statement, which is to provide spiritual tools for personal and global transformation. Its purpose is to awaken humanity to its spiritual magnificence, and its vision is a world that works for everyone. We're part of that. We can do our part. Ernest Holmes in The Science of Mind, on page 187, wrote, "Never limit your past view of life by any past experience. The possibility of life is inherent within the capacity to imagine what life is, backed by the power to produce this imagery or divine imagination. It's not a question of failing or succeeding. It's simply a question of sticking to an idea until it becomes a tangible reality. The illusion is the way we look at things. We have looked at poverty, degradation, and misery until they have assumed gigantic proportions. We must now look at harmony, happiness, plenty, prosperity, peace, and right action until they appear. So now what? I don't know, actually. I don't think anybody has the answers. We do know what doesn't work or hasn't worked so far. We individually and collectively do get to explore and figure out what does work. One idea from Jim Lockwood's Creating the Beloved Community. The local spiritual community must focus on the development of spiritual awareness and more expanded consciousness of its members. In other words, it must be as healthy as possible and continually work towards getting healthier. It must act in ways to help its members realize their own loving and compassionate natures more fully, and to help express those natures in a world beyond the actual or virtual walls of the local spiritual community. And it must recognize our humanness, our tendency to fail along our pathway of learning, to forgive ourselves when we fail and keep moving. This is how the culture of the local community must manifest if it wishes to be an authentic contributor to the universal beloved community. That sounds like a lot of work, but it's really good work, really worthwhile work. Are you in? You get to decide. The place to start is to choose to be responsible for yourself, to learn, to grow, to participate, to engage, to pay attention. Do this. Join me in doing this. Bless yourself and bless us all. Thank you. So now it's time for our community prayer, a spiritual affirmation prayer. So I breathe and I remember the oneness. I remember the unity that underlies all life. I remember the multiplicity of expressions, all the ways, all the facets of the diamond. Each individual shows up in the best way they know how, and each one can polish their facet. Each one polishes their facet the best way they understand. And I recognize that as I learn and express more clearly, my facet shines, and other people can be illumined by that. I don't shine for the purpose of shining, to be seen as shining. I shine because it's who I am. And I know many join me in that, because each one is called to their spiritual magnificence. And as each one does that, the world is improved. So I recognize not the particulars, because I can't see that well, but I recognize the essentialness of love as the motivating factor, of life as what we're doing and how we're showing up. And as more and more people share in this great good, my heart lifts, my mind expands, and I feel more people joining in this dance of life that we all live in. So I bless this day. I bless this awareness. I bless this opportunity in this particular very bizarre time that each one of us has to become more than we have known ourselves to be. And I bless every single person who steps up and does their part, because I know more and more good gets expressed in joy and delight. My heart smiles. I relax, allow, and let it be. So it is.